Hello everyone. I'm the storyteller from the channel Whispered Tales and I'm here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from? At what time are you watching? Now, get comfortable and relax. There is a stretch of road deep in the country where GPS signals vanish, where the trees lean in too close to the asphalt, and the wind sounds like it carries voices. That's where I found myself one late October evening, driving with no reception, no destination, just a need to keep moving. The car's headlights pierced through the fog like twin knives, revealing only 20 feet ahead at a time. The world felt stitched together by shadows. Leaves spiraled across the road in looping patterns, as though caught in some strange ritual. I should have turned back. But there was no signal. No familiar road signs. No mile markers. Just the same old country road unraveling before me like a spool of gray ribbon. Then, I saw it. A crooked wooden sign, nearly hidden by overgrowth, marked an exit I hadn't noticed before. There were no lights, no painted lines on the road that branched away into the woods. Just that sign. The letters were faded, barely readable. Black Hollow. It wasn't on any map I remembered. Not one I'd seen growing up, and I'd studied them all. I had a fascination with lost places, towns swallowed by nature, forgotten by time. This seemed to be one of them. The road that led into Black Hollow was narrow and uneven, more gravel than pavement, and every twist seemed to close tighter around my car like the forest wanted to swallow it whole. Still, I kept driving. Not out of curiosity, not even out of fear, but something else, something quieter. Like I was supposed to be here. Eventually, the trees parted just enough to reveal a clearing, and in it sat a village that looked untouched by time. Buildings of dark wood and weathered stone. A church steeple crooked at the top like it had bent to hear a secret. A general store, shuttered and silent. Lamp posts that leaned slightly, like old men hunched over canes. I pulled the car to a stop near what appeared to be the town square. The fog didn't lift. It just loitered low around the ankles of buildings, moving sluggishly like it didn't want to leave. There were no people. No cars. No animals. But the town wasn't abandoned, not exactly. The windows weren't broken. The structures weren't ruined. There was an unsettling intactness to everything, as if the town had been paused mid-breath. I stepped out of the car. The air was colder here. Not the natural chill of autumn evenings, but a stillness that clung to the skin. No birds. No insects. Just the creak of branches and the soft whisper of wind against wood. I walked toward the nearest building, a post office. The paint on the door had flaked off in delicate curls, revealing gray wood beneath. I pushed gently, and to my surprise, the door opened with a soft groan. Inside, dust motes floated like suspended snowflakes. The room smelled of paper, wax, and faint mildew. Rows of mail slots lined the back wall. Some had letters still in them, yellowed and curling, as if no one had collected them in years. And then I saw something stranger. A calendar hung behind the desk. The date, October 10th, 1931. Not just the year. The day. The month. And though the paper had aged, the ink looked fresh, as though someone had changed it just this morning. I stepped back, uneasy. The floor creaked beneath me in a way that sounded almost intentional, like the boards had waited for someone to hear them again. I left the post office. The silence outside had thickened. I could feel it now, like a presence that leaned in closer the longer I stayed. I moved further into the town. Past the bakery, its windows fogged from the inside. Past the tailor's shop, where faded mannequins stood in the window wearing clothes from another era, hats with wide brims, high collars, lace and linen that seemed too pristine for a place left behind. A clock tower loomed at the end of the square. The hands of the clock were moving, slowly, almost imperceptibly, but they were moving. That was the first sign I wasn't alone. Something in this village was still ticking. Still awake. I followed the main road out of the square, drawn toward a narrow path that led uphill. At the top of the slope, half hidden by mist, stood a house. Larger than the others. Older, maybe. Its windows were dark, but not broken. Its roof was steep and slick with moss. Ivy had crept up the sides like veins. There was a gate in front, wrought iron, rusted in places but still solid. I expected it to be locked, but it opened with a reluctant squeal. The garden was overgrown but not wild. Like it had been planted with care long ago and simply left to dream. There were statues, two, small stone figures of birds and angels, their features softened by time. One had a cracked face, and I could have sworn its eyes followed me as I passed. The front door of the house stood slightly ajar. I should have left. Instead, I stepped inside. The foyer was dimly lit by the fading light outside. A chandelier hung above, its crystals dull and webbed with dust. A long rug stretched down the hallway, its pattern faded but still visible, roses and thorns intertwined. I called out. No answer. Only the sound of my voice being swallowed by the silence. The floorboards here were quieter. Softer. As though they'd grown used to footsteps over the years and no longer cried out beneath them. I explored room after room, each one intact. Preserved. A library with leather-bound books arranged neatly on shelves. A sitting room with a fireplace that held the ghost of a fire long gone. Even a tea set on a table, the cups untouched but without dust, like someone had only just left the room. Then I found the mirror. At the end of the hallway, near the staircase, stood a tall, ornate mirror. Its frame was carved from dark wood, swirling with patterns of vines and eyes. I looked into it. My reflection stared back. But not exactly. My movements were mirrored. But a second too late. A blink delayed. A tilt of the head that felt more like mimicry than reflection. I stepped away. The reflection did too, just a breath after me. The sun had nearly vanished by then, and the house seemed to deepen with shadow. I returned to the foyer and stepped outside once more, the cold hitting me like a reminder that the night here did not welcome company. Back in the village square, lamps had begun to flicker on, by themselves. One by one. Pools of warm, amber light spilling onto empty streets. I looked up. The clock tower now read 8:06. But I hadn't been in the house that long. Had I? I walked quickly back to my car. The headlights still worked. The engine started. But the radio, the clock, the GPS, all were dead. I turned the car around, back the way I had come. But the road was no longer there. Where gravel had once been, there was now only mist. Trees pressed in where none had stood before. The path was gone. Erased. I was in Black Hollow. And Black Hollow did not let go. The mist wrapped around my car like a living thing, thick and unyielding. No matter how I pressed the accelerator, the tires churned through nothing but the soft embrace of fog and forgotten earth. The road, my escape, had vanished as if swallowed by the forest itself. I sat for a moment, breath fogging the windows, heart pounding in the silence. Then, with a resigned sigh, I stepped out again. The village was behind me, just on the other side of the mist. Faint shapes loomed, dark trees, old buildings, crooked chimneys, shrouded in the gray haze. The faint glow of lamplight flickered through the fog, beckoning me back. I hesitated, then walked. Each step pressed soft against mossy earth, the dampness seeping through my shoes. The mist swirled at ankle height, curling and twisting like smoke from a dying fire. As I approached the square, the eerie calm deepened. There was no wind now, no rustling leaves, only the soft echo of my footsteps, stretched and hollow between the buildings. The village, once paused in time, now seemed to watch. I wandered slowly among the empty streets, feeling the eyes of the place settle on me. Doors stood closed but not locked, windows stared blank but not broken. The air smelled of wet wood, earth, and something else, something faintly metallic, like old blood. I passed the bakery again. Its windows were fogged over, but now I could see shapes moving just beyond the glass, shadowy figures shifting in and out of sight. I blinked, but the shapes never became clear, always at the edge of vision. I pressed my hand to the cool glass. The surface rippled slightly beneath my palm, as though the window was a thin veil between this world and another. From somewhere, a clock chimed. Slow, measured, like a heartbeat counting down. The sound drew me toward the church. Its doors were shut, but the stained glass windows glowed faintly from inside, colors twisting and shimmering like oil on water. I circled the building, looking for another way in. At the rear, a narrow alley opened between the church and an old schoolhouse. The alley was darker, shadows pooling deep, but the air felt lighter somehow, as if the weight pressing down outside the alley didn't reach here. I stepped inside. The ground beneath was stone, worn smooth by countless feet. Above me, tangled vines clung to the walls, their leaves whispering secrets I couldn't hear. At the alley's end, a door hung open. Inside was a room filled with dusty pews and an altar draped in faded cloth. Candles flickered weakly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The scent of incense lingered, sweet and smoky. On the altar lay a book, large, leather-bound, its pages yellowed with age. I approached and opened it carefully. The handwriting was elegant, looping and precise. A journal, perhaps? I read, October 10, 1931. The hollow deepens. The clock's slow, and the shadows lengthen. We wait for the whisper to call us home. The word sent a shiver down my spine. I closed the book, but a slip of paper fluttered from between the pages. Unfolding it, I saw a crude map of the village, marked with strange symbols, circles, crosses, and lines that seemed to twist and loop like a labyrinth. A note was scrawled at the bottom: "Do not follow the path after nightfall. The hollow does not forgive." The sun had dipped lower, and the village grew colder. I tucked the map into my pocket and left the church, my mind buzzing with questions. Back on the street, a figure appeared. At first, I thought it was a trick of the fog, a shadow too defined to be mere mist. The figure stood motionless at the edge of the square, cloaked in a long dark coat, hat pulled low over the face. I called out, but the figure did not respond. Then, as I stepped closer, it vanished, dissolving into the mist like smoke. I was alone again. The lamps flickered out one by one, and the village plunged into darkness. Only the ticking of the clock tower remained, steady, relentless, counting down into the night. The chill of the night air wrapped around me like a damp shroud as I made my way up the hill toward the manor. Its silhouette loomed against the darkening sky, a vast, brooding presence perched on the ridge, framed by skeletal branches that clawed at the moonlight. The narrow path wound steeply upward, lined with tangled roots and crumbling stone steps. My footsteps echoed softly in the heavy silence, the only sound besides the occasional distant tolling of the village clock. The manor's front gate stood open as if inviting me in, the rusted ironwork groaning faintly as a cold breeze stirred. Beyond the gate, the overgrown garden sprawled wild and unkempt, shadows pooling beneath twisted trees and tangled bushes. I hesitated at the threshold. Something in the air felt different here, heavier, thicker, as if the manor exhaled a slow, patient breath. Pushing the heavy oak door open, I stepped inside. The foyer was vast and dim, the faint glow of candlelight flickering from sconces mounted along the walls. The air smelled of aged wood, dust, and a hint of something sweet, like decayed flowers. A grand staircase curved upward, its banister carved with intricate patterns of vines and thorns, much like the mirror I had seen earlier. As I moved further in, the floor beneath my feet was silent, as though the house itself was holding its breath. I wandered through room after room, an ancient dining hall with long tables covered in dust, portraits of somber-faced ancestors staring from gilded frames, a drawing room lined with tattered velvet drapes and cracked mirrors. In the library, rows of books stretched up to a ceiling painted with swirling clouds and distant stars. One book lay open on a reading desk, its pages filled with delicate script. I recognized some of the words from the church journal. The hollow is a place between places. Time flows like water here, sometimes still, sometimes rushing, but always leading somewhere unseen. My fingers traced the words, and a cold shiver passed through me. From somewhere upstairs came the faint sound of footsteps, soft, deliberate, pacing just beyond hearing. I stopped. The sound ceased. I climbed the staircase, each step creaking underfoot, and reached a long corridor lined with closed doors. At the far end, a single door stood slightly open, a sliver of pale light spilling into the darkness. I pushed it open. Inside was a study. Papers and maps lay scattered across a large desk. A journal rested open, its pages yellowed and worn. I picked it up. The writing was hurried, anxious. They watch from the edges. The shadows breathe. Do not trust the silence, listen for the whispers. A sudden chill swept the room, and I spun around. The window at my back was open, the night wind slipping in like a ghost. Outside, the garden was bathed in pale moonlight, but I could see movement, shapes darting just beyond the trees, watching. I closed the window and sat down, heart hammering. As I opened the journal further, a folded note slipped out. Written in shaky handwriting was a warning: if you value your mind, leave Black Hollow before the clock strikes 10. After that, the hollow takes what it wants. I glanced at the manor's old clock on the mantelpiece, 8:45. There was still time. But as I sat there, I could feel the walls closing in, the house exhaling a slow, deliberate breath. Black Hollow was alive. And it was waiting. The clock ticked steadily on the mantelpiece, each second a sharp reminder of time slipping away. I felt the weight of the journal heavy in my hands, as if it carried the burdens of all who had come before me. The pages whispered secrets in spidery script, stories of those trapped here, drawn by curiosity or fate, and swallowed by Black Hollow's insatiable shadows. One entry caught my eye: September 29, 1929. The village is not what it seems. The people move like puppets, their strings pulled by something unseen. At night, the hollow calls, a low, sorrowful song that seeps into dreams. I fear it is watching me now. I traced the words with trembling fingers, the dim candlelight flickering shadows across the room. The journal's author had lived here, or at least tried to, struggling to understand the invisible force that gripped the village. The next pages told of disappearances, of nights when people vanished without a trace, and of strange figures glimpsed in the woods, tall, thin shadows that flickered at the edge of vision. There was a detailed map sketched in the margins, marking places labeled the hollow, the watcher's perch, and the whispering tree. I shivered. The names felt alive, pulsing with unseen menace. I folded the journal carefully, the sound of the ticking clock growing louder in the silence. Suddenly, a soft knock echoed from the hallway. My breath caught. "Who's there?" I called, voice barely above a whisper. No answer. I rose, moving toward the door. The knocking came again, slow, deliberate. I opened the door to an empty corridor. The house was silent except for the ticking clock and my own racing heartbeat. A cold breeze brushed past me, carrying with it a faint scent, something floral, decayed, and strangely familiar. I turned back to the study. The journal lay open on the desk. But the pages had changed. New words had appeared, written in ink that wasn't there before: "You should not have come. The hollow watches, and it waits. When the clock strikes 10, the boundary will break." My skin prickled. I grabbed the journal and bolted from the room. Downstairs, the manor was darker, the shadows deeper. The candle sconces had guttered out, leaving only the pale moonlight streaming through stained glass windows. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling branches against the house like skeletal fingers. I ran to the front door, only to find it shut tight. I pulled, pushed, but it would not budge. Trapped. The manor seemed to breathe around me, the floorboards groaning, walls whispering. From the upper floors came soft footsteps again, slow and steady. I backed away into the darkness, heart pounding. Black Hollow was no longer just a place. It was a presence. And it had me. The sun had long since vanished beyond the horizon when the first shadows began to seep through the cracked windows of the manor, stretching and crawling across the floor like living things. Outside, the village of Black Hollow was swallowed whole by night, an endless blanket of darkness pierced only by the faint glow of the distant clock tower's lantern. The manor's interior was bathed in the faint silver light of the moon filtering through stained glass windows. Colors shifted gently across the worn carpets and faded wallpaper, painting ghostly images that danced just beyond the edge of vision. It was as if the house itself were breathing, its walls pulsing softly with a rhythm too slow to be natural but too steady to ignore. I stood in the grand foyer, the echoes of my footsteps swallowed by the thick silence. My hands trembled slightly as I gripped the worn journal, its fragile pages heavy with history and dread. The earlier warning haunted my mind like a persistent chill: when the clock strikes 10, the boundary will break. That hour was drawing nearer, and with it, the sense that the house, the village, the very air I breathed, was tightening its grip around me. A soft breeze stirred from somewhere unseen, carrying the faint scent of decay and old flowers, a fragrance that seemed at once both inviting and repellent. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and I pulled my coat tighter around me, though the chill was more than mere cold. It was the weight of something unseen, watching, waiting. My footsteps led me deeper into the manor, down a narrow corridor lined with faded portraits whose eyes seemed to follow me, their expressions a mix of sorrow and accusation. I paused before one, a woman with hollow eyes and a sad smile, her name etched faintly beneath, Evelyn Harrow. The name stirred something distant in my memory, a half-remembered whisper from the journal. Evelyn was the first to disappear. The corridor stretched endlessly ahead, and as I moved forward, the shadows thickened, folding around me like thick velvet curtains drawn closed. The ticking of the old clock tower seemed to echo here, its steady beat growing louder and more insistent, counting down to some inevitable moment. At the end of the hall, a door stood ajar, faint light spilling from the room beyond. The soft glow revealed a narrow staircase spiraling downward into darkness. The air that drifted up was cool and damp, scented with earth and something older, something like forgotten secrets buried beneath layers of time. I hesitated only a moment before descending. Each step creaked beneath my weight, the sound swallowed quickly by the cavernous space below. The stairwell opened into a wide cellar, lined with rough-hewn stone walls that glistened with moisture. In the center, a single candle flickered atop a crude wooden table, casting long shadows that writhed and twisted as if alive. My eyes were drawn to strange markings etched into the floor, circles and lines interwoven in complex patterns that seemed to pulse faintly under the candle's light. Symbols that matched those from the journal and the map, but here they felt more potent, charged with a restless energy that made the hairs on my arms rise. A low whisper drifted through the air, soft and indistinct at first, then growing clearer. It was a murmur of voices, snatches of conversation, half-remembered names, cries of warning and despair. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, a chorus of echoes trapped in the stone. I strained to listen. "Leave, before it's too late," one voice hissed, urgent and trembling. "The hollow takes what it needs," another warned, cold and relentless. The candle flickered violently, and the shadows leapt across the walls like living things. My heart hammered in my chest as the whispers crescendoed into a cacophony of desperate pleas and sorrowful cries. Suddenly, the candle went out. Darkness swallowed the cellar whole. For a moment, I stood frozen, senses stretched taut in the black silence. Then, faint points of pale light appeared, hovering just beyond reach, tiny orbs that glimmered like distant stars. Compelled by a force I couldn't resist, I followed the orbs as they drifted through winding tunnels beneath the manor. The walls here were slick with moisture, glinting faintly, and the air grew colder, heavy with the weight of forgotten memories. The path twisted and turned, each step echoing in the emptiness. The orbs led me to an ancient door, its surface carved with the same symbols I had seen earlier. My fingers traced the cold iron bands that reinforced the wood, and with a deep breath, I pushed it open. Inside was a chamber unlike any I had ever imagined, a circular room lined with mirrors, each one reflecting scenes not from my own world but from the past, moments frozen in time, faces caught between fear and resignation, glimpses of those who had vanished within Black Hollow's grasp. At the center stood a pedestal, upon which rested a book bound in cracked, dark leather. The pages were thick and yellowed, filled with names of those who had come here, and those who had never left. I reached out to touch it, the leather cold beneath my fingertips. Opening the book, I found the names arranged in columns, some crossed out, others written in shaky handwriting. Beneath them, a phrase was repeated over and over: "The Hollow remembers. The Hollow never forgets. The Hollow takes what it needs." A sudden noise behind me, a soft scrape against the stone, made me whirl around. The mirrors shimmered and warped, the reflections twisting into grotesque faces frozen in silent screams. I backed away, heart pounding wildly, but the door slammed shut with a thunderous crash. The chamber plunged into icy darkness. Around me, the whispers swelled, rising in a dreadful chorus, voices calling my name, warning, pleading. I was trapped. And I knew with sick certainty that Black Hollow was no longer just a village or a manor, it was a living, breathing entity. A cage. And I was its prisoner. The air inside the chamber was heavy, thick as if the very essence of Black Hollow pressed down upon me from all sides. My breath came in shallow gasps, mingling with the cold whispers swirling in the dark. I forced myself to take slow, measured breaths, trying to anchor my mind amid the growing chaos. The mirrors, once silent witnesses, now shimmered with life, their surfaces rippling like dark water disturbed by an unseen wind. Faces emerged from the glass, pale, hollow-eyed figures locked in expressions of terror, sorrow, and pleading. They seemed trapped in the shimmering depths, reaching out with translucent hands, mouths moving in silent cries. One face drifted closer, and for a moment I thought it was mine, only to vanish like mist when I blinked. The whispers grew louder, layering into a discordant symphony of voices from long ago, each telling fragments of a story I was only beginning to understand. We were drawn here, lured by the promise of answers. The Hollow is a hunger, it feeds on fear, on memory, it never lets go. A chilling realization settled like ice in my veins. The village, the manor, the Hollow itself. It was a force beyond comprehension, ancient and patient. It existed between moments, between worlds, pulling those who strayed too close into its endless maze. I moved to the pedestal and traced the names once more. Some bore dates spanning decades, others were recent, fading into the present. The repetition of "The Hollow takes what it needs" carved itself into my mind like a mantra, a warning, a curse. The floor beneath me began to tremble, subtle at first, then stronger, like the heartbeat of the earth itself, slow and unyielding. Suddenly, the mirrors shattered, shards raining down around me like fractured memories. But instead of cutting, the glass dissolved into mist, swirling upward to form a figure, tall and indistinct, cloaked in shadows. It regarded me silently, its presence cold and oppressive. A voice echoed inside my head, calm, ancient, and terrible. "You came seeking truth. Now you belong to the Hollow. You are part of the story." Panic surged through me. I backed away, but the chamber seemed to stretch, the walls retreating as if welcoming me deeper into the unknown. I forced my eyes shut, willing myself to breathe through the rising fear. When I opened them again, the figure was gone, but the whispers remained, a chorus of sorrow and warning. I knew then that escape was no longer just about leaving the manor or the village. It was about understanding the hollow's nature, its hunger, its rules, its boundaries. With trembling hands, I turned back to the journal, searching for answers among the faded pages. There, hidden in the margins, I found a passage I hadn't noticed before. To leave the hollow, one must walk the path of shadows, face the memories it guards, and offer what it demands. Only then will the boundary hold. The words were cryptic, but clear in their intent. The hollow was a gatekeeper, and passage required sacrifice. I stepped out of the chamber, the heavy door closing behind me with a soft thud. The manor was silent again, but the air was charged, alive with unseen eyes and whispered promises. Outside, the night was deeper now, the village swallowed in a darkness that felt almost liquid. The clock tower's bell tolled once. Then twice. With each chime, the air thickened, and the line between this world and the hollow's realm blurred. I knew the time was near. The air grew heavier still with each echo of the clock's slow, deliberate toll. It was as though the sound itself warped the fabric of the night, stretching seconds into eternity. With every deep boom, the shadows around the manor lengthened, thickened, moving with a will of their own. I stood on the threshold of the manor's heavy front door, hand resting against the cold wood. Outside, the world beyond Black Hollow seemed distant, muted, like a faded memory. The village lay under a blanket of thick fog, winding streets vanishing into the swirling white, houses dissolving into spectral shapes. The hollow's boundary was no longer invisible, it shimmered faintly, a quivering veil hanging between this world and another. I could feel it brushing against my skin like a sigh, cold and ephemeral. I knew what I had to do. The journal's words echoed in my mind: walk the path of shadows, face the memories it guards, and offer what it demands. But the path was not marked on any map. It was a journey through the spaces between spaces, a crossing not just of ground but of time, memory, and fear. With a deep breath, I stepped outside. The fog enveloped me instantly, a thick, cold mist that seeped into my clothes and soaked my skin. The village was silent, too silent, the kind of silence that hums with hidden life. As I walked the cracked cobblestones, the world shifted subtly. The familiar shapes of the village blurred and warped, the lampposts flickered with an unnatural blue light, and the houses seemed to breathe, their windows like eyes watching. Every step echoed softly in the fog, but beneath the sound, I could hear another rhythm, soft, distant footsteps matching my own pace but never quite close enough to see. The journal's map resurfaced in my mind, the locations marked with cryptic names. I headed toward the Whispering Tree, an ancient oak said to stand at the village's edge where the land met the endless forest. The journey was slow, deliberate. Every sense was heightened. The air tasted metallic, like iron and rain. The smell of damp earth and rotting leaves filled my nostrils. The fog whispered, soft voices weaving in and out of the wind, speaking in languages I could almost understand. As I neared the tree, the world seemed to hold its breath. The fog parted just enough to reveal its gnarled trunk, thick and twisted like the limbs of a sleeping giant. Its bark was rough, scarred with deep cuts that pulsed faintly as if alive. Beneath its roots lay the path, the true crossing. I knelt and traced my fingers over the soil. The earth was warm here, oddly alive. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me, pulling me inward. Suddenly, a shadow moved at the edge of my vision, a figure cloaked in darkness, its face hidden beneath a hood. It stepped forward, voice low and gravelly. "Do you understand what you must offer to pass?" I swallowed hard. The figure extended a pale hand, holding a small, worn token, a locket, its surface etched with strange runes. "This is the price," the voice said. "A memory, a part of your soul, a piece of yourself. Only by giving something can you hope to leave the hollow behind." My heart pounded. The weight of choice settled heavily on me. Could I give away a part of myself to escape? What would remain once the hollow had claimed its due? I looked into the shadow's face, empty, endless darkness, and knew there was no turning back. With trembling hands, I took the locket. The fog thickened, swirling around me like living smoke. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of my memories, my fears, my very essence begin to unravel. The path before me shimmered, a bridge between worlds. One step at a time, I began to walk. The moment my foot crossed the threshold of the shimmering path beneath the whispering tree, the world twisted. The fog thickened into a living wall, pressing in on me, muffling sound and bending light. The air grew heavier, as if soaked in ancient sorrow, and the ground beneath my feet seemed less solid, shifting like water. I felt a pull, soft but irresistible, drawing me forward into a realm between worlds, where time unraveled and memories bled into reality. Around me, shadows flickered, neither fully formed nor entirely absent. Faces emerged in the mist, familiar yet distorted, their eyes hollow, their mouths moving in silent screams. Some were friends, others strangers, all trapped in the hollow's eternal grasp. The locket in my hand pulsed faintly, a heartbeat against my palm. It was the price, the key, but also a weight, a sacrifice. Each step forward was a battle against the creeping despair. My thoughts threatened to unravel, pulling me toward the edges of consciousness where fear and doubt whispered of surrender. But I pressed on. The path wound downward, spiraling into darkness beneath the roots of the ancient oak. The cold seeped through my bones, and the air smelled of wet stone and forgotten grief. A low hum began, deep and resonant, vibrating through the earth itself. It was a song of the hollow, a lament that spoke of loss, of souls swallowed, of time lost and never regained. The walls of the descent grew taller, carved with symbols that glowed faintly, runes of protection, of warning, of binding. I reached out to touch one. The stone was warm, alive with energy that thrummed against my skin. A sudden vision flashed behind my closed eyes, a moment from long ago, a woman, her face streaked with tears, clutching a child as shadows crept closer. Her voice was a whisper carried on the wind. Remember. Remember what was lost, or be lost yourself. I stumbled forward, heart pounding. The boundary between past and present blurred. Deeper still, the path opened into a cavernous chamber. The air was thick with the scent of earth and smoke, and in the center stood an altar of rough stone, stained dark with age. Upon it lay a mirror, cracked and swirling with mist. The whispers crescendoed into a chorus. I stepped closer. The mirror's surface rippled, and I saw my own reflection staring back, but it was not alone. Behind me, shadows loomed, figures from the past, their eyes filled with sorrow and warning. The hollow demanded more than just a token. It demanded reckoning. I reached into my coat and pulled out the locket. Holding it up, I felt the weight of all I was about to lose. With a steady breath, I placed it on the altar. The chamber trembled. The mirror glowed, then shattered, fragments dissolving into light. The shadows around me wailed, then faded, leaving only silence. For a moment, I was free. But I knew the hollow was patient. And this was only the beginning. The chamber's silence was heavier than any sound, pressing against my ears like the weight of 1,000 whispered regrets. For a moment, I stood still, heart pounding in the hollowed space where the mirror once stood. The locket was gone, vanished with the shards of glass and the lingering shadows. I took a slow breath, trying to calm the roaring chaos inside my chest. The price had been paid, the sacrifice made. But the air felt different now, charged with something ancient, something watchful. I turned to find the path back, but the cavern seemed to have shifted. Walls that were once solid now dissolved into swirling mist, and the way I came was gone, swallowed by shadows. Panic flared, sharp and sudden, but I forced myself to steady my breath. The journal's words echoed again, face the memories it guards. Only then will the boundary hold. I realized the return was not a simple journey. It was a trial, a confrontation with the past, with the things the hollow collected and preserved. The mist thickened, coalescing into shapes, fleeting scenes of Black Hollow's history, moments frozen in spectral light. I saw the village as it once was, bustling, vibrant, alive with laughter and music. Children playing in the streets, vendors calling out their wares, the clock tower gleaming proudly against a golden sky. Then, the scenes darkened. A shadow spread over the village like a plague. Faces twisted in fear and desperation. Doors slammed shut. Windows barred. The people vanished one by one, swallowed by an unseen force. I watched a woman, perhaps Evelyn Harrow, reach out for help, her voice trembling as she warned of the Hollow's hunger. I saw the manor's walls close in like the jaws of a trap, sealing the village in a time loop, a prison of memory and sorrow. Tears streamed down my face as the weight of their fate settled upon me. The Hollow was not just a force of hunger, it was grief made manifest, a guardian of secrets and sacrifices. The mist began to thin, and I found myself back beneath the whispering tree. The first light of dawn was breaking, softening the edges of the village's spectral veil. I knew the path back through Black Hollow's streets, but the village felt different now, quieter, as if holding its breath. With each step, the fog lifted a little more, revealing the worn stones and faded signs of a place caught between worlds. The manor loomed ahead, its dark windows watching, waiting. As I crossed back through the heavy front door, the warmth of the morning sun brushed my skin. The boundary was holding, for now. But the Hollow's hunger never truly ends. And somewhere in the shifting shadows, I felt its eyes still watching, patient and unyielding. I was free, but the story was far from over. The morning light filtered weakly through the manor's dusty windows, casting pale rectangles on the floorboards. The silence was profound, wrapping around me like a shroud, comforting, yet fragile. I sat in the grand parlor, journal open but heavy on my lap. The words I'd read, the memories I'd faced, lingered like shadows in the corners of the room. Outside, the village slowly stirred. The fog that had cloaked Black Hollow all night was dissolving, revealing the worn cobblestones and peeling paint of forgotten storefronts. For a moment, everything seemed normal, as if the night's horrors were nothing but a dream fading with the dawn. But deep down, I knew better. The Hollow was a part of this place. Of me. Of every whispered secret and shadowed glance. As I stood, the floor creaked beneath my feet. The house felt alive again, not menacing, but watchful. From somewhere distant came the faint tolling of the clock tower, slow and steady. The sound was a reminder. A reminder that some boundaries never truly close. I walked to the window, looking out over the village. In the distance, the ancient oak stood silent, its gnarled limbs reaching toward the pale sky. And I felt it. A presence, patient, waiting, eternal. The Hollow was still there. And so was its story. But for now, the night had passed. And in the quiet dawn, there was a fragile peace.